Atheism in its most general sense is the absence of a belief in a God or gods. Atheism with a lowercase a is not a belief system. It is not a creed. It is not a system of morality. It is simply the lack of a belief in a God for whatever reason. Most agnostics are atheists by this broad definition because the word God could mean anything. And you can't possibly disprove the existence of something that is not clearly defined. Such a God is fictional. Such a God does not exist. First, I will give you my lowercase reasons, and then I will give you some positive uppercase A reasons for this claim. First of all, it's the lack of evidence. If there's anything that's obvious, it is that the existence of God is not obvious. Even the Bible says that. Truly, you are a God who hides himself. Because if there's a God, where is he, or she, or it? Now, some people say that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. But I disagree. If something is truly non-existent, then the only evidence we could possibly have for its non-existence would be the absence of evidence for its existence. The absence of evidence is not proof, but it is certainly evidence. If God is obvious, if God does exist, if there is evidence for him, then why are we having this debate? We don't debate things like gravity. We don't debate things like, who is our president, or does Saudi Arabia exist as a country? We know these things by evidence. If there is a God, if there is evidence for a God, then why are there unbelievers? Why are there atheists? Are we just blind? Are we just inherently evil and we just want to close our eyes to something that others claim is so obvious? The very existence of 1 billion non-believers on this planet, it's not proof, but it is certainly evidence. I offer myself as Exhibit A. I do not believe in a God. It is not evident to me. It is not obvious to me.
So let's go with the basics here. First, you say that you use reason. Absolutely. Reason is a very necessary tool by which mankind needs to ascertain the realities. For one were to remove reason from his tools, then he fails to reach its goal. You say there's 1 billion people who are atheists. Well, I think you've taken it a little bit too far, because a Buddhist is not an atheist, he is what we call a non-theist. He does not reject the existence of God, he simply defines it differently in a different manner, and we can discuss that later. When you say that the claim of, you say that you believe in, you claim knowledge and not believe. I fail to understand how a person can come forward and say that there is no God and say that I don't have a belief. It's a claim of knowledge, you say, but it's not a belief. And I don't understand that difference. When you say lack of evidence, it's amazing that in all the debates that has been taking place between atheists, such as people like Bertrand Russell, as you all revere very much, the atheists that do, you find that this argument of design is so conspicuous, it's staring and glaring in one's nose, yet you simply say, well, this is just to be discarded as just a mere existence of some primordial soup that came into existence out of nothing with nothing, by nothing, through total probabilistic game, which is absolutely impossible from all standards of logic and reason, as we would say. So the interesting fact is that, yes, reason is a necessary entity, but something that is so prevalent, that is so clear about the system of design in the universe, and to reject it and simply say that it has no purpose, no design, no meaning, it just came out of nothing, going nowhere, with no meaning, I think that is really, really stretching the issue way beyond reason. It becomes totally unreasonable, and that's the question.
I would also ask you, and I will ask you if I get a chance, Hassan, if you do expect me to disprove God, then tell me what you would accept as a disproof. The principle of falsifiability, I think, is useful. It may not be 100% perfect, but it's useful. For any statement to be true, there must be things that can be said about that statement which, if true, would make the statement false. And the failure to prove these falsifiable statements true strengthens the truth claim of the original statement. Now, I expect Hassan is going to give some of these arguments for the existence of his God, and I will attempt to rebut them during my rebuttal time and attempt to show that many of these arguments are basically just God of the gaps. They're arguments from ignorance. Another evidence for the non-existence of God is that all these God believers claim, virtually without exception, that believing in God makes you a better person, makes you more moral. Believing in God is how you can live the good and right life. But when you look at the lives of believers, you don't see better lives. You don't see... Muslims are not more moral people than atheists. They don't love their children anymore. They don't provide for charity anymore. Muslims, Christians, and Jews were just about the same. In fact, in America, non-believers score better than Christians do on a lot of these moral, charitable things. And if there is a God who gives us these absolute moral standards, then why do no believers agree on what they are?
So when you say something is falsifiable, how do you prove, for example, what do I expect from you? The very basic question that we're debating this issue is, if you and I did not exist, why would we be debating? The question here has got nothing to do with anything further than our existence. We exist. We want to know, where did we come from? What is our goal? You mentioned in all your debates, in your arguments, with regards that we are moral people, we're good people, we do good things, we give charity. I fail to understand why. Honestly, and I'd like if you can give me some explanation on that, why would you do that? You came from nothing, you have no goals, you're going nowhere, you have no goals. Why for this transient period of time are you so concerned about even coming forward and telling the world that God doesn't exist? I fail to understand that. Really, I'm being very, very concise on this matter, but when you say it's falsifiable, falsify my existence. I challenge that. Tell me that I don't exist. Because the minute you discuss your existence and my existence, you and I have to go back and question the integrity of where we come from. And that brings me to the next question. I've noticed, for example, that you speak about God. We call Allah God. What is Allah? Allah, from the Islamic perspective, means the God, the absolute, indivisible God. The Holy Quran says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say God is unique, one. Allahu Samad. God is independent. Nothing depends. He depends on nothing. Everything depends on Him. Lam yalid. He does not beget, nor is He begotten, nor is He born. So for someone to say that God had a son or sons or sonship, as you mentioned, and we agreed on that we don't accept that. This absolute God has no frame of reference. Frame of reference implies something that is bound within time, matter, and space. The problem with these arguments is we keep constantly debating on the issue of bringing God to the relative world. The relative world cannot exist without an absolute creator, and that's the argument. You keep arguing on the issue of God in the relative sense. God is not transient. He is the necessary existence. We are the transient existence, meaning that you and I can exist or not exist. There's an equal chance, as one would say, that a person who exists, who is dependent, cannot cause his own existence. It can tip either way. There has to be a higher necessary existence who is the immovable mover, who is not bound in time, matter, and space. So every time you ask questions about matter, is God a mind? Is He thinking? Does He have gray matter? That's, again, a matter of relative discussion. When we say that God is bound in time, how did He know tomorrow? Tomorrow is not a substantive matter to question about God. God has no tomorrow. He knows. His knowledge is infinite in the absolute sense of the word. And absolute cannot be defined, but we understand it indirectly, for this relative universe can never exist without an absolute creator.
On September 11th, Hassanain, those God believers who committed that act of terrorism had a foreknowledge of the evil that they wanted to do. They had a belief in a God, they had a belief in a heaven. And it's not only Muslims, but it's believers of all stripes who commit horrible acts. What if you had known what was in the mind of those terrorists? What if you had known about it in advance? And what if you had the ability to stop it without any risk to yourself? Would you have stopped them? I would have. I'm sure you're a good man, and you would have stopped it. You would have stopped the bloodshed. You would have stopped the trauma. I would have, as a good human moral person. If you say yes, you would have stopped it, then you're nicer than God. Because God had the foreknowledge, God had the power to stop the brutality, but He did nothing about it. In my book, He is something of a moral accomplice.
And even an atheist, as you know, yourself also, that when you become ill, you go to the hospital and get yourself fixed because life is very precious to you. It's amazing that you came from nowhere, you're going nowhere, yet life is so precious, you make every effort to make sure you live. And that alone is sufficient indication for man to say, what's wrong with you? Haven't you seen this wonderful system created in you? So when you say, you're talking about infinite mercy of God, yes, the mercy is infinite. The fact that you and I have this power to even discuss is the mercy of God. The fact that you and I have the power to reject is the mercy of God. The fact that you and I have the power to obey is the mercy of God. That's what we see as infinite mercy. When you say justice and mercy cannot exist together, that's once again, if you put it in a dimension of the relative world, it makes sense. But God is not relative, He is absolute. So thus, this question is not possible. Final point here. So when you say about evil, and I'll answer this question. You've asked this question even to all your previous people with regards to children dying. How would you have stopped him? Would you have stopped him? Yes, I'm under a trial. If I could have stopped September 11th, I would have. But God is not under trial, so it is irrelevant for Him.
Well, you also have the opposite presupposition. I don't see how either one is more merited than the other.
From the Islamic perspective, is humans were created not for this world, but for the next world. This is what my presentation was for. When a child dies in this world, even if it's killed or if it dies a natural death, don't worry. It's accounted for in the future, in the hereafter, and it's going to be rewarded. If a man commits a crime on another person, that person who received the crime will be rewarded. There's a beautiful system of accountability.
Can you point to anyone in heaven or hell? Can you point to everyone? Can you point to someone in heaven or hell for some deeds to show that certain people go to heaven and which people go to heaven?
Mr. Carrier, do you put money in your bank?
Yes.
Why? You haven't seen tomorrow. Why do you do it?
What does that have to do with?
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.